The phone rang at midnight, and I stared at the unknown number flashing on my screen, exhausted and numb from another long day of trying to rebuild a life that had been stripped down to nothing. I almost let it ring out, almost ignored it like I ignored most calls these days, because bill collectors and lawyers had made me afraid of my own phone. But something made me answer, some instinct I couldn't explain, and when I pressed accept, a woman's voice came through, trembling and uncertain. "You don't know me," she said, and I could hear fear in those words. "But I married your ex-husband," and my whole body went cold. My heart started racing, because why would his new wife be calling me at midnight? Why would she sound so scared? "My name is Nixara, and I think I've made a terrible mistake. I think we both have." And I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, every nerve in my body alert. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, and she took a shaky breath. "I need to tell you something about Calum, something he's been hiding from both of us." Before I tell you what she said, before I take you through everything that happened next, I need you to understand who I am. My name is Aloan Soraya Kamanzi, and I'm a working professional who spent the last 2 years rebuilding a life that was systematically taken apart. I'm not a victim and I'm not a villain. I'm just someone who trusted the wrong person and paid a price I never should have had to pay. People look at me now and they see someone who survived, someone who kept going when most would have given up. But what they don't see are the nights I couldn't sleep, the meals I skipped because I couldn't afford groceries, the panic attacks that hit me in grocery store parking lots, the shame I carried like a second skin. I never thought the worst chapter of my life would begin after my marriage ended. I thought divorce was the hard part, the painful part, the thing I had to get through. But I was wrong. The real nightmare started after the papers were signed. From the outside, our marriage looked perfect. We had the photos to prove it. Vacations in tropical locations, anniversary dinners at expensive restaurants, carefully curated posts about our life together. People commented on our pictures saying we were relationship goals, saying they wanted what we had, saying we looked so happy. And maybe I was happy, or maybe I was just so deep in it that I couldn't see what was really happening. Calum was charming and successful and everyone loved him. He knew how to work a room, how to make people feel special, how to present the perfect image of a devoted husband. But behind closed doors, things were different. Not abusive exactly, not in ways people could see, but there were quiet power struggles, small moments where I felt myself disappearing, decisions made without discussion, my opinions dismissed so smoothly I barely noticed it happening. And slowly, so slowly I didn't realize until it was too late, I was being erased from my own life. Calum handled all our finances from the beginning, and I let him because it seemed easier. He was good with numbers, organized, efficient, and I was busy with my own career, my own responsibilities. So when he suggested putting everything in a joint account that he'd manage, I agreed. When he suggested the house should be in his name for tax purposes, I trusted him. When he took over our investments and savings, I didn't question it. "It's got this," he'd say whenever I asked about our finances. "Don't worry about it. I'm taking care of everything." And I believed him, believed he was protecting us, believed he had our best interests at heart. But trust is a dangerous thing when placed in the wrong hands. I didn't know he was building a financial structure where I existed on paper but owned nothing, where every asset was his, every account under his control, every decision his alone to make. I thought we were partners building a life together, but really I was just a guest in a house he was preparing to kick me out of. The marriage collapsed faster than I could process. There was no dramatic fight, no cheating scandal, no violence or betrayal in the traditional sense, just Calum coming home one day and saying he wasn't happy anymore, that we'd grown apart, that he thought we should separate. And before I could even respond, before I could suggest counseling or ask what was wrong, he handed me divorce papers already drawn up, already detailed, already filed. He'd been planning this, preparing for it, talking to lawyers while I was at work, organizing our separation while I was still believing in our future. "I think this is best for both of us," he said, and his voice was so calm, so reasonable, like he was discussing a business transaction instead of ending our marriage. I hired a lawyer with money I didn't have, tried to fight for what I thought was fair, tried to protect myself, but Calum had been 3 steps ahead from the start. The court awarded him everything. The house we'd bought together became his alone. The car I drove every day went to him. The joint savings account I'd contributed to for years was somehow mostly his. My lawyer tried to explain how it happened, something about titles and documentation and financial records, but I couldn't focus on the legal jargon, couldn't understand how 12 years of my life had just been legally erased. "You'll get spousal support," my lawyer said, trying to find something positive, but the amount was barely enough to cover rent in a decent apartment. I walked out of that courthouse with 2 suitcases full of clothes and personal items, a laptop, some books, and a legal bill that would take me months to pay off. I had no savings, no car, no home, nothing to show for 12 years of marriage except debt and the clothes on my back. And Calum, he walked out with everything we'd built, everything I'd helped create, and a clean slate to start over. Weeks later, I saw the photos on social media, my former home completely redecorated, new furniture where ours used to be, different paint colors on walls I'd chosen, and there was another woman in those photos, Nixra, younger than me, elegant and confident, smiling in my kitchen, sitting on my porch, driving my car, living my life like I'd never existed. Mutual friends liked the posts, commented about how happy Calum looked, how beautiful his new girlfriend was, how they were such a great couple, and I felt sick. Not jealous exactly, but something worse, like I'd been completely replaced, like everything I'd been was now being performed by someone else, better. I wanted to comment, wanted to tell everyone the truth about what he'd done, how he'd stripped me of everything, how quickly he'd moved on, but I didn't. I just blocked him, blocked her, blocked anyone who might show me updates, and tried to pretend none of it mattered. I moved into a small rented apartment in a part of town I couldn't afford before, because now it was all I could afford. The furniture was borrowed from friends or bought secondhand, mismatched plates and cups, a mattress on the floor until I could save enough for a bed frame. The walls were thin and I could hear my neighbors fighting. The parking lot wasn't safe at night, but it was mine. It was shelter. It was all I had. I worked longer hours to cover expenses, took on freelance projects at night, ate cheap meals, and skipped social events because I couldn't afford them. My friends tried to help, but their pity felt worse than struggling alone. They'd invite me out, then look uncomfortable when I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. They'd offer to pay, and I'd feel humiliated. So I stopped going, stopped answering calls, stopped pretending I was okay. The nights were the worst, alone in that apartment with nothing but my thoughts and panic attacks that came without warning, hitting me in waves of shame and fear.
6 months after our divorce was finalized, I saw the wedding photos. Calum and Nixara smiling in front of a beautiful venue, surrounded by the same friends who'd been at our wedding, some wearing the same outfits even. She wore white, and he wore the same suit he'd worn when he married me. And something about that felt deliberately cruel, like he was performing the same ceremony with better casting. The comments were full of congratulations, people saying they'd never seen him so happy, that he deserved this, that they were perfect together. And I wanted to scream, wanted to tell them he'd destroyed me financially, left me with nothing, moved on before the ink was even dry on our divorce papers. But instead, I closed the app and tried to convince myself I didn't care, tried to focus on rebuilding, on surviving, on moving forward. But late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, I wondered how he'd done it so easily, how he'd replaced 12 years so quickly, how he could smile in those photos while I was still trying to figure out how to afford groceries. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known while I was struggling to survive, was that Caleb's perfect new life was built on lies. He'd hidden debts during our divorce, massive ones, credit cards I didn't know about, loans taken out in both our names that he'd concealed from the court. He'd transferred assets before filing, moved money into accounts his lawyer never disclosed, falsified financial documents to make it look like he had less than he did, and he'd used Nixara's inheritance, money from her late father, to pay off immediate debts and maintain appearances. She thought he was investing it, growing it, planning their future, but really he was covering his tracks, erasing evidence, building a life on her money while hiding from his lies. I found payments to lawyers I didn't hire, she told me over the phone, transfers to accounts I can't trace, and when I asked him about it, he said I was being paranoid. But she wasn't paranoid. She was right, and now we both knew it. I took everything to my lawyer, the same one who'd failed to protect me the first time, and I watched his face change as he reviewed the documents. "This changes everything," he said, and his voice was serious, almost angry. "If we can prove he hid these assets deliberately, if we can show financial fraud, the court will reopen your case." And for the first time in 2 years, I felt something like hope, something that scared me because I'd learned not to hope, learned that hope led to disappointment. But I couldn't help it. This was real. This was proof. This was everything I'd needed to show that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts had been right, that Caleb had stolen from me legally and deliberately. We filed motions, submitted evidence, requested investigations, and I watched as the legal system that had stripped me bare suddenly pivoted, suddenly saw what it had missed, suddenly took me seriously. Nixara agreed to testify, to provide bank records, to admit what she'd discovered, and together we built a case that Caleb couldn't deny. Nixara confronted him first. I wasn't there, but she told me about it later, how she'd laid out the evidence, the transfers, the hidden accounts, the lies, and how he'd tried to talk his way out of it, tried to explain it away as misunderstandings, as her not grasping financial complexity. But she didn't back down, didn't let him manipulate her the way he'd manipulated me. "I want the truth," she'd demanded, and when he couldn't provide it, when his explanations fell apart under basic questions, she told him she was leaving, told him she'd given everything to my lawyers, told him it was over. And according to her, he'd panicked then, really panicked, begged her not to do this, said he could explain everything, that she was ruining his life. But it was too late. The investigations had already started. His accounts were being frozen, auditors were requesting records, and his carefully constructed lies were unraveling faster than he could contain them. His reputation at work suffered. Colleagues started asking questions, and the man who'd taken everything from me suddenly found himself exposed. The courts reopened my case, and this time the judge looked at everything differently, looked at the evidence Nixara had provided, the financial records that showed deliberate deception, the pattern of manipulation that Caleb had used. "This is fraud," the judge said, and those words felt like vindication, like someone finally believing me, finally seeing what had happened.
Calum's lawyer tried to fight it, tried to claim the new evidence wasn't relevant, tried to discredit Nixara's testimony, but it didn't work. The proof was too clear, too documented, too undeniable. The same system that had stripped me bare was now seeing the full picture, now understanding how I'd been robbed legally, now prepared to make it right. It wasn't fast, legal processes never are, but it was happening. Accounts were being audited, assets were being traced, and everything Calum had taken was being examined under a microscope he couldn't charm his way out of. And I sat through every hearing, watching him squirm, watching him lie less confidently, watching his arrogance crack. Calum lost his job, something about the investigation creating conflicts of interest, about his employer not wanting the liability, and without that income, everything else fell apart. He couldn't afford the mortgage on the house, couldn't make payments on the car, couldn't maintain the lifestyle he'd built on lies and stolen money. The house went into foreclosure, the car was repossessed, Nixara had left and taken what remained of her inheritance, and Calum found himself exactly where he'd left me, starting from zero, no savings, no assets, no support system. The difference was he'd done it to himself, had chosen deception over honesty, had valued control over partnership, and now he was facing consequences I never wished on him, but couldn't help feeling were deserved. Mutual friends who'd celebrated his wedding went quiet, stopped posting about him, distanced themselves from the scandal, and the man who'd taken everything from me suddenly had nothing. His silence was louder than his arrogance had ever been. I didn't celebrate when I heard about his downfall, didn't throw a party or post about it online. I just sat quietly in my apartment, the same small space I'd been living in for 2 years, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction exactly, more like release, like I'd been holding my breath for so long and could finally exhale. Revenge hadn't healed me, karma hadn't made me whole, but knowing the truth had mattered, having proof had mattered, being believed had mattered. I realized that survival doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it just looks like peace, like being able to sleep through the night, like not flinching when the phone rings, like rebuilding slowly and carefully without anyone watching. Healing isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's just continuing to exist when existence felt impossible. It's getting up every day and trying again. It's learning to trust yourself after someone made you doubt everything. And I'd done that, was doing that, regardless of what happened to Calum. Nixara called me one last time, her voice different now, steadier. "I want to apologize," she said. "Not for loving him, I can't apologize for that, but for unknowingly living off your pain, for benefiting from what was taken from you." And I didn't know what to say, didn't know if I forgave her or blamed her or felt nothing at all. "You didn't know," I said finally, and she was quiet for a moment. "No, but I should have asked more questions, should have looked closer, should have wondered why everything seemed too perfect." We talked for a few more minutes about Calum, about the lies, about how easy it is to believe someone when you love them, and when we hung up I felt strange, like we'd been connected by one man's mistakes, 2 women who'd trusted the wrong person and paid different prices. I didn't know if we'd ever talk again, didn't know if we needed to, but there was something meaningful about that call, about her choosing honesty even when it hurt her too. I reclaimed part of what was taken through the legal settlement. Not everything, some things can't be recovered, but enough to rebuild with, enough to pay off debts and start saving again, enough to feel secure for the first time in years. I moved to a better apartment, bought furniture that was actually mine, started investing in my own future instead of just surviving each month. But more than the money, I reclaimed my dignity, my sense of self, my understanding that what happened wasn't my fault, that trusting someone isn't weakness, that being deceived doesn't make you stupid. I rebuilt smarter this time, opened accounts in my own name, educated myself about finances, took control in ways I should have done years ago, and I moved forward not in fear, but with clarity, with boundaries, with the knowledge that I'd survived the worst and was still standing, still capable, still whole despite everything that tried to break me. If the person who destroyed your life collapses under their own lies, is it closure or just karma doing its job? I still don't know the answer. What I do know is that closure doesn't come from watching someone else fall. It comes from rebuilding yourself, from learning to trust again, from choosing peace over revenge. Calum got what he deserved, but that didn't heal me. What healed me was time, was therapy, was forcing myself to keep going when giving up felt easier, was learning that my worth wasn't determined by what someone took from me. The truth came from the last person I expected, from the woman who replaced me. And maybe that's the lesson, that sometimes justice arrives through unexpected channels, that sometimes the people who benefit from your pain become the ones who help expose it. I don't know what I'd do if it happened again, if someone else called with a confession that changed everything, but I know I'd listen, because truth matters, because proof matters, because being believed matters more than revenge ever could. So I ask you, what would you do?